Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to another car edition of Ending Physician Overwhelm. This was not my intention, but let's just say that life is lifing, and I have to roll with it. So that's what we're doing today. And no harm, no foul. You have a life. Things happen to you. I know that you get where I'm coming from. But again, today we're in the car. Thankfully, the yard waste truck has passed. But here we are. So, what we're talking about today is what am I no longer willing to do? This came up out of a conversation I had with a recent coaching client. We are looking at how do we reconfigure her work schedule because she's looking to cut down FTE, but we don't simply want to cut down FTE, right? We don't simply want to work less. We really want to think about what is it that I want? Where do I want to spend my time and energy? What am I able to do? What am I going to do when I gain back time? And we want to be really intentional about it because unfortunately, what happens so often is, we might finally get permission. So ridiculous that we have to ask permission for this, but we might finally be able to cut our FTE. And what so often happens is that we are not thoughtful about the way that we use that time. We might not be thoughtful about where that time goes. And we need to do that because it's not simply that we want to work less for the sake of working less. It's that we are looking to have more of something else in our lives. That might be more time for ourselves, more time to focus on our health, right? To actually be doing the exercise that we know is such a good idea. That might be more time with your family or friends or a partner or your aging parents, right? There are things in our lives that we actually want more of. It's very easy for us to focus on what do I want less of, right? I want less long days that, ultimately last 10 to 12 hours where I'm just charting and then I go home and I quickly shove some food in my mouth, right? And see my family. And then I finish charting and I'm up until midnight, right? We want less of that clearly, but we have to be thoughtful about what is it that I actually want more of and help to create that for ourselves. So we were talking about this, my client and I, and, she was saying, well, I want to work less. There's piles of laundry in my house and, I want to spend time with my daughter and it's important to me to be able to do this. And, I had to stop her and say, okay, now we aren't trying to cut our physician FTE in order to do more laundry. So I want to be very clear about that. I hear, right, that there is distress, that there are piles of laundry everywhere, but let's be clear. I don't think any of us have the intention of cutting our FTE in order to be able to do more laundry. Okay. So that is an important point. But wherever you are in your place of work and of home and of life, there are things that you have been willing to do in the past that you may have to say, I'm no longer willing to do that. Now, again, as we were going through what this client's schedule, would look like, the question is, what is it that we want? What do you want? If you got to pick, what do you want? And one of the things that was on her schedule is an evening hours clinic. So this person does some adolescent medicine, and out of courtesy, right, every provider in her clinic was doing an evening in clinic that went initially as late as 8, but more recently as late as 7. And that was really impacting her because of some issues that were going on at home. Now, when she first started doing that schedule, when she had first started in this clinic, her life was different. And so often this happens to us where we've been asked to do something as part of our initial sign-on contract, or maybe it got something added, and maybe initially it was fine. It was fine. There was nothing wrong there. But eventually it became something that was no longer okay in some way. was impacting us in a way that it hadn't before, or we found ourselves feeling really frustrated and resentful because even though maybe it was presented to us one way, the reality was that it was something else. How many times have we heard, oh, this new tool or this new policy is going to help us in this one way, but what ultimately happens is something very different. And because there is this disconnect between what we were told and what actually happens, and it's not going well, it's not serving us well, maybe, it's not serving our patients well, it's adding to stress, or whatever, right? That might be another instance where we are no longer willing to do something. So let's think through this in your life and think about different places where we might have to ask ourselves this question: what am I no longer willing to do? I was willing to do it then. I'm no longer willing to do it now. So when we think about work, now, many of us have felt that I really have no negotiation ability here. There's really nothing that I can ask for. They will not compromise on anything. Sometimes that is pretty true, right? We might be in an employed position where no one is allowed to have a schedule that's different. No one is allowed to start later or stop earlier or, to work anything that's remotely flexible. Sometimes that is true. And I'm not suggesting here that that is not the situation for so many of us. But what I will say is negotiable is, okay, well, if that is the rule, that is the lay of the land in this place, what is negotiable is whether or not this place is still a good fit for me. Perhaps it was a good fit for me before. Perhaps this rigidity that has come in or, that affects me in a different way than it did before, that has me feeling resentful and frustrated, maybe that's no longer a good fit. Maybe it started and it was more flexible and it has become more rigid and inflexible over time, and that no longer fits. Maybe you were more flexible because maybe you didn't have the things in your life, aging parents, young children, teenagers, a partner. Maybe there are different things that are going on now that weren't there before, and you are now no longer as flexible as you were. There's nothing wrong here. And we don't have to look back at what we were willing to do before and think that we were clearly wrong in order to say, this is not a good fit for me now. So I think it's important that as we are coming to this work, that we sit down and we think, what is important to me? What is important to me? What am I willing to negotiate and be flexible on? What am I not willing to negotiate and be flexible on? Because when you are clear with yourself, then you get to go into discussions. And it's true. Maybe you won't get any wiggle room. Maybe they will not negotiate with something. If you have asked the question, if you have advocated for yourself, if you have been willing to do the uncomfortable thing and ask for things that are important to you, and you've been told no, maybe with a good reason, maybe not with a good reason. Maybe that's just the way we do things here. Maybe we can't do that for you because then we'd have to help out other people. Then you get to decide for yourself what is okay and what is not okay. What am I willing and not willing to do any further? So as you are thinking through this for yourself, think about your values. Think about safety concerns that have influenced your decisions, right? Think about the goals that you have for yourself. If your goal is to be more present for your family, whatever that looks like, and there is no negotiability in terms of flexible scheduling, and that doesn't work for you anymore, when you're clear on what's important to you in this phase of your life, it makes it so much easier to make decisions, right? When my client and I were working through this, the evening clinic wasn't as big a deal as some of the other things that she was interested in negotiating for as she was thought about reducing her FTE. So if we can maintain some flexibility, we can still ask, I would like to no longer do evening clinic. We can still ask that. But if that's not the most important thing, right, then that becomes our negotiation tool. I would be willing to continue working this evening. However, I want this other thing over here, right? Being able to know where you are and you're not willing to compromise is going to be really important going into those discussions. So think about that. Your goals, your values, where you feel safety is being compromised. I have another client who is an amazing surgeon. She does complex head and neck cancer surgery, right? Hours and hours long surgeries. One of the problems is that where she is located, she is very isolated from other people who can do the complexity. She does not have residents and fellows. And so these patients having these complex surgeries in this relatively isolated place, she is on the hook for round-the-clock checks on them again and again and again and again. She is not incapable of doing surgery and doing surgery well, but what is not sustainable is being constantly on the hook for round-the-clock checks on these patients again and again and again and again, right? So it becomes this, what am I no longer willing to do? I'm no longer willing to do Q4-hour checks on patients multiple times a month for days at a time when I'm the only person here doing that, right? It isn't a problem of skill or ability. It's a problem of I'm no longer willing to be the only one on the hook who is able to come in and monitor my patients appropriately and do these complex surgeries, which means that this area will not have access to the complex surgery because it is unsustainable for that one individual to do that for a wider range of patients, right? We have to be able to see if we want to have a life, right? If we want to be able to, just to live, we may need to make those hard choices. We have to be clear on our values, safety concerns, what is important to us. Let's move on now to thinking about home, right? Where does this come up at home? Now, there have been things that you have been doing that are not helping your quality of life, and maybe they're necessary, right? We would all argue, I think, that laundry does need to get done. Unless you are in the habit of buying a new set of clothes every week, which I'm going to guess you're not, right? Laundry needs to be done. Now, if laundry brings you joy and it's not a big deal and hopefully you have help and it's simple and straightforward, then that's probably not the place you're going to go. But if you find yourself cutting hours in order to spend more time doing laundry, and it is breeding resentment and frustration because that's not why you cut your hours, that is not a good trade-off, right? You have been willing to do your own laundry or clean your own home or do your own yard work in the past because maybe in the past it was not a big deal. Maybe you had more time than you had money available to you. But what is the situation now? Do you want to be spending your free time doing those things? Or do you want to say, where I am in my life right now, I'm going to pay someone else to come and clean my house. I'm going to pay someone else to do my laundry. I'm going to pay somebody else to do all the really boring yard work that needs to be done because I don't want to spend my precious free time doing it. You are not, again, incapable of doing this, but you are no longer willing to spend so much of your own time and energy in order to be able to get those things done. Now, there are probably some things that you are finding yourself doing that might not need to be done by anyone. There are probably some things that could be done by another human who lives in your house. And I'm a big proponent of getting your kids and partners and any other humans that live in your house on board with starting to pick up tasks on their own. We think that we are such hardworking people. Oh, we don't want to have our kids do chores, right? Because we're already gone so much and we're stressed and, we don't have that lovely sort of stay-at-home mom thing and it's all a happy camping party, right? But your kids, no matter what, do need to learn some skills around taking care of themselves. I would argue if you live with a partner also who does not know how to do laundry or load the dishwasher or do anything useful, they need to know. If they are not able or willing to learn, that needs to tell you something because you are no longer willing to be the only person who does all the housework. You are no longer willing to do that, right? You have to be clear on that. You have to figure out what are the solutions here right? Whether that's another person who lives in the house, whether that's somebody else that you're going to pay to come in. But unless these things bring you great joy and hopefully minimal distress or duress or sucking your energy out, you need to make that decision in order to have the things that you want. Again, let's go back to the goals and the values that you have. We are not cutting FTE. We are not trying to just create more busy work at home. We are actually trying to have time and space in our lives for the things that are important to us that we have been putting off because we have been so busy working at work, so busy working at home without really finding joy and space for ourselves in our lives. The next part where I want us to take a look at ourselves is, what am I no longer willing to accommodate in terms of relationships? Now, this could be in any arena of your life. Again, it can be in work relationships. It can be in romantic relationships. It could be in family relationships. What are you no longer willing to tolerate? It might have been okay at some points in your life. It is not okay now. I could go into too many details about this, so I think I'm going to just hold myself in there. But you think about where this comes up with patients. Maybe there have been things that you have been offering to patients in the past that you are no longer willing to do. Maybe you have let your visits run long. Maybe you have been, willing to do things that took you a lot of extra work in order to spare them from needing to go and see a different provider, or, have a referral of some kind. I know that myself as a primary care provider, sometimes in an effort to save someone from the inconvenience of needing to go to see someone else, I have taken on probably more than was reasonable. It's not that I was doing anything dangerous, but that it was taking up a lot of my time to figure out, how do I work this up thoroughly? How do I interpret these test results when they come back? How do I start to manage? Now, I've been willing to do that in the past for a variety of reasons, but I am no longer willing to do that, especially when I am fully able to send that other human to someone who is far more knowledgeable in that area than myself, and especially when it is not something that I want to choose to become better at. Again, in the lens of primary care, there are so many different directions that we could go. I myself am becoming more differentiated in, taking care of patients with obesity and metabolic disease, taking care of patients with menopause concerns. At this point in my life, I am less interested in taking care of teenagers and young people and, doing some of the things that I have done before. I have never been one who has been hot to trot on musculoskeletal medicine. I used to do cortisone shots all the time when that was something that was thought to be a great idea to do. Am I still capable of doing cortisone shots? Yeah. But when patients ask, can I get a cortisone shot? Not from me, you can't. Now, that might not be a great example because I know the evidence has really not shown that that's, in part, right, because I'm not sure that it's a great thing to do, but also in part because I don't want to spend my time doing it, and I get to make that choice. We so often will feel pressured to continue doing something that we have done, even if something about us has changed, or something about the procedure has changed, or something about the treatment plan has changed. And we don't make a change because we feel uncomfortable shifting from something we've been willing to do in the past that we are no longer willing to do. Another great example have been the shifts that have happened with opiate pain management since I was a resident. There were so many more patients on chronic opiate pain management, and now the shift has really happened that we're really, really, really carving down on that and digging ourselves out of the hole that this whole shift in medicine has been, right? So I'm no longer willing to start somebody even remotely on that path. I've gotten so much more conservative on hardly ever prescribing opiates for just about any reason. Now, that may be different if I was in different circumstances dealing with different patient population, but right now where I am, it is very easy for me to say, I just don't prescribe those medications. Just easy. I realize in saying that, yeah, I'm pretty privileged there. And again, not all of us have that privilege to be that flexible, but there are places where you can be more clear on your values, and it is going to lead to uncomfortable conversations. Again, we could think of this in the patient arena. We can think about this at home. We can think about this with our extended family. What are you no longer willing to tolerate? What are you no longer willing to say yes to? It is a worthwhile conversation to have with yourself because, again, when we do not do this, when we are not clear on what is or isn't important to us, we will end up feeling frustrated, resentful, overwhelmed, overworked, and we cannot agree to do that anymore. So, my hope for you is that you'll sit down and you will think about this. What have I been willing to do in the past that I'm no longer willing to do? Thinking about this through the lens of what do I want for my life and my career, knowing that I don't have 100% control over all of the things, but in this sphere where I currently am, I have the ability to say more clearly what I am and I'm not willing to do. I have the ability to change choices, to not look back at my past decisions as being wrong or terrible or awful, but to say, I was willing to do this in the past, and now things have changed. Perhaps evidence has changed. Perhaps my life circumstances have changed. Perhaps something else. Perhaps you've just woken up and realized that you need to have better boundaries because you are drowning. All of these reasons are valid reasons to sit down and do this work. What was I willing to do before that I'm no longer willing to do? My friends, that's what I have for you today. I am heading off to a midday appointment with my child's pediatrician for a parent-only child visit that my pediatrician is not willing to do by telehealth. Now, I share this as an example. I don't love this. I don't love this on my side of things. I had to cancel clinic, but this is an important concern and I need to go talk to her. This is how we scheduled. They don't offer telehealth visits, or she doesn't offer them. I don't love it, again, but I also respect her ability as a physician to say, I don't do telehealth visits, full stop. She is in a situation where she can do that, and I respect that. So that's why I'm in my car right now. That's why it's the middle of a Monday, and I am heading off to go see her to talk about my child. This is real life. I know that you know that this is what happens, and let's all respect and honor what this means for each other. Yes, it is difficult. It's difficult for us to stand up and say what we're no longer willing to do. It is challenging when someone else presents a boundary and says, hey, I'm not willing to do that. I don't offer that. That is okay. I'm not going to get bent out of shape because she's made that decision. I decided, you know what, this is important. I really need to talk to her. And therefore, this is what I'm going to do because it affects the health of my child, right? I'm going to respect that and honor that in her. And I'm going to trust that the people that I am meant to serve as a physician who are going to come in and see me, who are going to make the choice because I'm not in an emergency setting at all, they are going to be able to be willing or not willing to come and see me within my boundaries. That's what I'm going with because, frankly, for such a long time, the ethos has been you are not allowed to have boundaries. But we are allowed to have boundaries. Again, as somebody who does outpatient medicine, my boundaries are going to look different from somebody who works in the emergency room, who has very clear hours, right? Shift work, right? Which is a different kind of boundary. And that's going to be different from someone who is a hospitalist or a surgeon. Again, there are different ways that this looks for our lives as physicians, but we need to figure out for ourselves, where are my boundaries compromised? What am I no longer willing to do? This is the right work to do if we want to feel better and have the lives that we need and deserve. All right, my friends, off I go. Take care.